I got my ass kicked so hard. These ladies that I thought were like old ladies, and they were like running tires up a hill. I'm like, this is insane. She was such a catalyst for me in that time in my life to be like, get your shit together. This lady is living with cancer and she's going to a boot camp. I was going out partying every night. What are you doing with your life?
Welcome to Seacoast Stories, a podcast about the people, businesses, and newsmakers that make the Seacoast an American hidden gem. I'm Trey Farkas, and on today's episode, how Sarah Oleson became the area's queen of the yoga retreat after she got her shit together. Today's story starts in the bathroom. Last winter, I was at Wild Valentine, my favorite coffee shop in Portsmouth. And when I closed the bathroom door behind me, I couldn't help but notice the face that was smiling back at me. On a flyer attached to the door was the photo of a woman. And this flyer was littered with pictures of exotic places like Costa Rica, Mexico, Guatemala, among others. The QR code then led me to her website, where I learned this woman leads yoga retreats that take people to beautiful places all over the earth. A yogi and world traveler myself, I snapped a photo of the flyer, filing this information away for future Troy to think about. And you know how when you learn a new word or phrase for the first time, and then you just start seeing it pop up everywhere? That's what happened with that woman, Sarah Oleson. Once I learned about her from that flyer, I started seeing more flyers around town. Then people just started telling me about Sarah, her classes, and the amazing trips she leads. So when I started this podcast in June, I knew that Sarah Oleson was absolutely someone I needed to talk to. And after sitting down with her for today's episode, I totally understand the hype. Yoga retreats have become all the rage. These days, every yoga teacher on the Seacoast seems to lead them, and by all accounts, Sarah's are the best. I can't confirm that, but I did sign up for her Mexico trip right after this conversation, so I'll draw my own conclusion then, but I can already tell you this. She is one heck of a saleswoman, an amazing teacher, and an even better person. Sarah currently lives in Portsmouth, and she grew up just down the road in Newburyport, which is where her Seacoast story begins.
My memories are usually of the ocean and of all the state parks in the Seacoast area. We were really fortunate to have parents that we didn't have a television growing up. So we were sort of born into nature, if you will, and taught that being outside, even in the depths of the winter in the Seacoast, is part of it. So my memories are being outside, Odioran Point, Maudsley State Park, Plum Island Beach. I mean, the ocean is like one of my most favorite things in the universe, and I tend to run to the ocean wherever I am. So it's really a beautiful place to grow up and to learn about nature and be completely immersed in. I love the Seacoast. I really do. I can't say enough about it for part of the year.
When you're traveling the world and you're meeting all sorts of people on your yoga retreats and they're asking you about where you come from and you tell them Massachusetts, New Hampshire, and they have no idea what you're talking about, how do you describe the area to them?
Okay, yeah, that is a really good question. It's always interesting because when I'm in Southeast Asia, if I say I'm from Boston, no one knows what I'm talking about. But if I say New York, they will know. So I can be associated with like New York City, which is I think I've been to New York City maybe 5 times in my life, and it's so not me. But it's hard to describe. I typically show a picture, honestly, of the ocean and of Portsmouth, like where we live. But if I'm in Costa Rica, people know Boston. They'll say, oh yeah, Boston Red Sox, you know. So again, it's typically about the city. which makes sense. People are going to go to places for the city. But oh my goodness, for me to go into the city of Boston now, especially driving in, is like really important. It has to be happening for me to go into the city because I never drive, because when I live in Costa Rica, I'm on foot, and same in Bali. I go everywhere by foot or on a scooter. So for me to be driving is like a big thing, especially driving in a city.
Why do you prefer that mode of transportation as opposed to driving?
Oh, wow. It's a better form of meditation for me. The driving is everybody's trying to go too fast, too soon. And I remember a guy a couple years ago, I was living in Costa Rica during COVID at a retreat center. And finally, one day, this guy comes up to me. He's like, "Hey, you're the lady that walks." And I was like, "Oh, yeah, I am the lady that walks." Because I just found it helps me to really slow down. And when you're driving, it's like, how fast can I get to this destination? I don't know. That's how I think of it anyways. Like, it's like the fastest way for us around here to get to a destination. And to me, walking somewhere is like, oh, wow, even walking here to meet you, it's like, I'm really taking deep breaths, slowing down, getting prepared. And I feel in the car, sometimes it could be tense with traffic or with I don't know. Some people love, love, love driving, especially if you're on like a back road in Vermont. I mean, it's going to be quite different. But for me, the walking is more of the meditation.
As a yoga instructor who is trained in the breathing and the meditation and the being present, is it still difficult for you, even when you're walking, to slow down and not be so focused on just getting from A to B as quickly as possible? Or have you just mastered that by now?
No, it's always a challenge, and it's always different. And that's why I encourage people to keep trying meditation again and again. If you tried it and you say, I hear people say all the time, I can't meditate. I'm always encouraging people, try again, because each day is different. I meditate every day. Is it the same every day? No. Is it more challenging on certain days? Absolutely. Just like life, it's going to be different. Our bodies are different every day. Our rhythms are different every day. So yeah, getting from point A to point B, I might have a pep in my step one day, when here I was sort of meandering over.
When was the first time you were introduced to yoga?
Well, I like to say like when I was born, right? Because yoga can be defined as so many different things. In the text, it's defined as like the union, the yoke or the union. And if we're talking like a yoga practice or a yoga class, I was brought into yoga with my mom when I was earlier than I can remember, but I can remember about around the age of 5. She would bring me to her yoga studio in Newburyport with her. We were always taught from the time we were really young to growing up to sit in quiet and silence, especially like in a house without television, and having that beautiful ability to be in nature all the time. I remember going to her quite frequently to yoga. And I think around, I don't know, in one of the classes, I just remember looking around and being like, what are these people doing? Like, I remember being like, this is so weird. But it was to me something very normal. And my mom was just a practicing yoga person. So like to me, I would go to classes there. But I do remember at one point, maybe like 5 years after going with her, being like, what are we actually doing here? You know? So around the teenage years, of course, I sort of lost touch with yoga, because when you're 12 years old or 13 years old, you do not want to do anything close to what your mother is doing, right? Like I was like, oh, my mom does that. I definitely don't do that. I was doing everything the opposite. And I was really into my athletics and my sports, and going to yoga with my mom was just not on the list. So I lost it at that point, the physical practice or actually going to class. But I believe that because yoga is such a well-rounded thing, the yoga has always been part of my life. The meditation, the practice of living from your heart, right? We can call it so many things. The yoga is in how we eat, how we breathe, how we speak to one another and make eye contact. So that's why I say, I don't really know. I think I've been practicing since I was born.
At what point did you reconnect with your 6-year-old self going to the yoga classes in the studios?
When I was in high school, I went to a couple classes just for athletics purposes, you know, just to like stretch my body, and a couple more in college. And then it wasn't until after college, when I finished my bachelor's degree, I moved back to Amesbury. and was working in the restaurant business and just sometimes going to yoga here and there. And then I got really, really into it when I was working towards my master's degree in elementary ed and also working at the restaurant late nights. So I was like burning the candle on both ends and needed some mental clarity and stability when I was working so hard. So I really found more of a purpose behind the meditation piece and the practice together, the physical practice together at that point when I was in my 20s.
In my research for this conversation, I relied on a close mutual friend of ours, Stephanie, who runs Three Bridges.
Love Steph. Love her.
We all love Steph. And I said, Steph, I'm having Sarah Oleson on. What should I ask her? She responds, one simple sentence that you're going to hate. Ask her about her 20s. And I don't quite know what she means by that.
Is this where we say cut? No, I'm kidding.
Sarah, why should I ask you about your 20s? What happened?
Well, I think she just means, like when people see me, I saw my college roommate the other day and she's like, I just can't get over, when I see you now. I think, I was in this point in my life where I was not in tune with my body in my 20s. I was binge drinking, just like the partier. Like I said, I like to be a leader. And I think at that point, it was like, who's going to get as crazy effed up as me tonight? That was like the goal. It's wild to think about how like 5 years of my life was not lost. And I never like to say like it's wasted time, right? Because I was really unhealthy to my body. My mental state was all messed up. Drugs and alcohol, too much. And it wasn't lost. It was a lesson learned. It was lots of lessons learned. And I always say everything gets us to here and now. And I learned how to be nice to my body and healthy to my body a harder way than other people. So
after having grown up the way you did in the environment that you did, how did you get so far away from that person?
Yeah, because it was like a free for all. When I went to college, like I grew up in a household where it's like everything is very calm. And then I went to college. I'm like, to my mom and dad, I'm like, why don't you guys tell me I could just do whatever the hell I wanted and go crazy? So that's why it was like after so much time of, I was straight A student, very much in this little carved out box, right, of what it should be like. And then going to college is like, woohoo, I can be and do whatever I want and also go out every night if I want to. There was no guidelines.
Were there any low points for you that you remember specifically?
Yeah. I mean, like, there was a lot of death of my friends, unfortunately, because of drug and alcohol use. These were all wake-up calls that I still wasn't waking up to. I mean, there was, there were arrests. I mean, those can kind of be laughed at now, but in the time it was like scary and, nothing crazy. I didn't do anything too bad, just like drinking in an open container in public and running down the street or something like that. But, it's, again, all of these are lessons that we have to learn. And I think the hardships during that time in my life, again, with a lot of death, like I was dealing with it again in the wrong way. I was dealing with death of friends and family members was definitely what I tell people not to do, which is like just replace it with something else. Now when a friend or family member passes, it's like, okay, I'm giving you a blessing to be in this new part of your next life, much healthier.
So what was your wake-up call? When did you decide to reverse course?
I had a couple of like epiphanies, but I think one was I was a nanny. So I did nannying a lot during my summers when I would work in the restaurant, come home from college and be a nanny for families and like be a live-in nanny. And I was a live-in nanny for this wonderful, amazing woman who's a dear friend of mine. She had 3 boys and she has been living with lung cancer for 19 years. She was diagnosed with lung cancer when she was pregnant with her third son. And I started taking care of Will, her third son, when he was 2. So, I mean, basically I was there with her in this insane, terrible cancer treatment process and taking care of her kids. And I was at the time like 25. And she could tell that I was being, that I was troubled, that I was having a tough time, that I was going out partying every night. And she said, hey, there's a group of us moms in our 40s. Come meet us at boot camp tomorrow morning. And I'm like, oh my God. But I felt this call that I needed to go because I'm like, if she can do it and she has lung cancer and like these 40-year-old women are doing it and I'm 25, I'm like, I should be able to do it. I got my ass kicked so hard. These ladies that I thought were like old ladies and they were like running tires up a hill. I'm like, this is insane. And actually, she was it's like adversity, right? It's like she was such a catalyst for me in that time in my life to be like, get your shit together. Like this lady is living with cancer and she's going to a boot camp at 5:30 in the morning. So like, what are you doing with your life? So Diane Legg is her name. She's a brilliant human and she has been such an inspiration for me.
Thank you for sharing that. You said that you were getting your master's.
Yes.
Why did you decide to pursue the master's and become a teacher?
So another piece of what I do is because of Lucy Grogan, and I talked to you a little bit about Lucy's Love Bus and the work I do with them. I decided to go back and get my teaching degree because I was taking care of a girl with leukemia. Well, I took care of her from when she was 5 years old and she passed away when she was 12. So I was also babysitting for that family at the same time. Lucy was such a brilliant kid, brilliant human. And she loved school and she had cancer and leukemia and she couldn't go to school for a lot of the time. She went to like a private school and then she had in-home tutors because she was receiving treatment. She had treatment in the hospital and she had obviously people teaching her classes. But I'm like, it was so important to me to see how when she was going to school, she went to a sweet little school, which is no longer open in Amesbury called the Sparhawk School, how the teachers were treating her and how she was accepted with no hair and obviously very ill, on steroids, prednisone. And to me, I'm like, I want to be in a setting like this where I can teach kids and I can teach them to be kind humans and I can teach them to accept all of the diversity around them and to live with that. And no matter what the kids look like. And so I enrolled in getting my master's degree in elementary ed, not really thinking of where it would bring me now, but it has helped me so much. I believe that all the education and being a teacher and being a leader has helped me in this teaching yoga as well. So when I was a school teacher for a couple of years, similar to Steph from 3BY. I was a school teacher for a couple of years. I realized it wasn't the life for me, I think because of the strict guidelines, and I'm too much of a free spirit to be teaching to like the test, if you will, which I understand, like, right, we have to do this in schools. But I got out of the public school system because it was too much of the strict guidelines for me as a teacher.
So once you left that, what was the plan?
Yeah. So the plan was I was managing a restaurant and still doing some teaching and tutoring. And then I crashed a wedding one night with my husband. And I remember saying to him, like, okay, now it's 1 a.m. and I want to get up and do yoga tomorrow. And he's like, oh, you love yoga so much. Why don't you just go get your yoga teacher training? And I'm like, oh, I don't know why I hadn't really thought about that. I had been going to classes really regularly for years. And like I said, I've been practicing since I've been born. So I think I just didn't think of ever being a teacher of that type because it was such like a ingrained practice in me. It's like, oh, I wouldn't teach it. I just practice it every day. And so I'm like, oh, okay. I thought about it. And then I kind of started researching and I found this yoga teacher training in Bali in Indonesia. And I kind of said, oh, no, I can't afford that. I can't do it. That's crazy. And I put it aside. And then that day I went into, I think it was like actually White Heron when they had first opened and they had something, the Bali blend. And I'm like, oh God, it's a sign. And then it's like okay, no, push it aside, push it aside, push it aside. I went into some other place and in the bathroom, it's like made in Bali. And I'm like, what? Okay, stop. So we went out to dinner like a couple days later with my best friend and her husband and my now husband. And I said, I'm going to Bali. And I just like announced it, like just said it. And they were like, wow, that's amazing. So that's how it happened. And yeah, the financial piece was scary, but I said to my boss at the restaurant, like, I need to work every day until I leave and doubles, like just put me on the schedule because in the restaurant business, you know, it's just like you can make quick money, but you got to work. So I saved up enough money to go and traveled a little bit before and after. And yeah, it was definitely life-changing.
Coming up, what Sarah did after this life-changing trip and how she deals with the hypocrisy of having a yoga business. Stay with us. This is Seacoast Stories. Hey everyone, it's Troy. I want to butt in for 30 seconds here, and then we'll get right back to today's story. As I write this, I have 4 conversations scheduled in the next 2 weeks. Conversations that I'll share on this podcast soon. I can't reveal the guests yet, but I promise you will love these episodes. To make sure you get these new shows every Monday morning, just follow the podcast wherever you listen. If you do that, it helps you hear the latest from the show, and it also helps me reach more listeners on the Seacoast. So, if you listen on Apple, Spotify, or YouTube, just find Seacoast Stories and hit that follow button. Thank you so much for doing that, for the support, and for being here today. I really appreciate it. Now back to today's story. Why was your trip to Bali such a life-changing experience?
Well, Bali is such a heart place. When I think of Bali, it just like exudes love. I tell that to people all the time. The people, the smells, the food, just the way that people live there. I mean, I was talking to a guy there once and he was trying to explain to me how they don't have a future tense. And I don't know if this is like something actual or like if he's really saying like in their language or in their belief system, they don't actually have a future tense because they live so much in the present moment, which I'm like, oh, wow, living in the present moment. This is what we teach all the time in yoga. So I loved that as well. I would ask the guy where I was staying in the little casita, I'm like, is it going to rain tomorrow? He's like, what? We're talking about today. We're not talking about tomorrow. You know, why would someone ask that? But like, here we are planning our lives 10, 20 years before they're even happening in this life that we live here. And it's so different there. And I really love and appreciate that.
So when you returned from Bali with your 200-hour certificate in hand, what did you go do with it then?
Yeah, that's a good question because I also would love to tell new teachers to teach right away. Because I was actually, this is funny because when I finished my YTT, I was meant to come home right after. But I kept calling my fiance at the time, which bless him, because he's probably like, at this point, like she's going to be gone forever. She's just moving to Bali. I kept calling him being like, I think I'm going to change my flight and stay a little longer. And he's probably like, what? Is she ever coming home? But what I did was all the other women that I was in the training with, women and men that I was in the training with, we traveled a little bit. We backpacked around and went to different islands in Bali, which was super fun. But they were younger. Because at this point I was 28 and they were into like partying, you know, and I'm like, I'm not staying in a hostel. I'm not going to parties. I am really taking this seriously. And we went to one of these islands and it just so happened, of course, I always think like the universe provides what we need. I walked in and the guy said, oh, well, my wife is sick and she's the teacher. Can you teach this whole week? So I was immediately forced into, in a very good way, teaching my first classes on a beach in Bali, like, wow. So it was this beautiful opportunity. So again, I call up my fiance at the time. I'm like, honey, I'm going to stay another week because I'm going to teach here. Okay. So
Poor guy.
I know, right? When I finally got home, I had a little bit of teaching experience, which is different from people that are just like thrown into, okay, like I have, like you said, And that's a great question because you have this certificate, right? And now you're certified to teach, but like, where do you start? So I was lucky enough to, because I'd been practicing yoga all in this area for a while, I had some contacts at studios and they immediately started putting me on the schedule and just putting myself out there. It's all about like, do you trust in yourself? It's just like applying for a job, right? Like, do you want the job? Do you think that you can do the job? Stand up for yourself and believe in it in that way. And they'll listen, you know.
So the yoga retreat business, when did the idea for that first start coming into your mind?
Really right after I got back from Indonesia, because I had gone on a retreat with my friend Lauren Lee in Tulum, Mexico, maybe 5 months after my teacher training in Bali. And we had a wellness coach and she was lovely, this woman, Tori. I said, I think maybe someday I would like to travel like you all are doing these retreats. And she made this beautiful layout for me, sort of like a coach with like my goals and put that as like the 5-year plan. And I get home from that trip. So it was 6 months about after I'd graduated from my first teacher training in Bali. And I get an email from the leader of that. And she says, I have a retreat center in Spain. Someone canceled that is supposed to host 17 people at the retreat. Does anybody in this teacher training group want to come bring a group there? And can you gather a group together? And I was like, here's my sign. Here's my chance. I need to take this opportunity. So I answered right away and I said, yes, I would like to bring a group, not knowing if I could get, like, this is just me. That's
Right.
typical me, like flying by the seat of my pants, saying yes to it because it felt right, not having anybody signed up or anyone that I know is going to sign up. But, you know, growing up in an area, I'm so blessed to live in this beautiful area of New England where I have so many contacts. And I just started putting it out there. I made like an email list and I'm like, hey, I'm going to be teaching a yoga retreat in Spain. And after a few weeks, I had it filled.
Really?
With, my friends. So it was really fun, actually the first one. And it was very special because Lucy, the little girl that I babysat for that I was telling you about from Lucy's Love Bus, her mom was able to attend the retreat. So it was very special. She had just lost her daughter. So, I had 17 people coming on my first yoga retreat with me. I'm kind of like, again, flying by the seat of my pants. But it was an incredible experience and it went so well. And from that moment on, I'm like, this is what I'm doing. This is what I'm doing.
Why do you think those 17 people agreed to go do this wild, crazy thing with
I
you?
have no idea. I don't know. No, I don't know. It's like maybe they trust me. They trust me. I always say, and I say this to Steph and my yoga teacher friends, like you go to a yoga class usually with a teacher because like you like their personality, you like their teaching style, yes, but like you trust them to hold the space for you. So I felt that these people trusted me to hold space for them for a week. And that to me is such a beautiful honor. So I still laugh about it and say, I don't know. I don't know why. Like it's me. I'm not sure.
So you do that first retreat with those 17 people in Spain. Then what were the next steps toward making this into a real thing after you had been shown the signs?
So, yeah, I got home from Spain, realized that this is what I want to do more retreats. So I was still teaching a bunch of regular classes, still working in the restaurant at that point because it's tough to make a living just teaching yoga classes, So I was working in the restaurant, paying off my student loans. And then the next opportunity that came up was a retreat in Costa Rica at Blue Spirit, where I've led maybe like 15 retreats now there. So that was the second opportunity, took that. So I think, Troy, it started with just like 2 a year or 3 a year. And then I just started adding more on and moving away slowly from the restaurant business and teaching in studios and moving more towards like, I'm an entrepreneur. I need to start my own business. I need to go where my heart's calling, which is traveling more and taking people for longer groups. When I teach a yoga class, it's awesome, right? It's 1 hour that people can be in their bodies, that they can be separate from maybe the world out there, that they can get away from whatever they need to get away from. But imagine that for a whole week of being really in tune with your body. And this is what was so important that I wanted to keep bringing to people because it was so powerful. and them using, everything that they learn for a whole week or a long weekend, even the local retreats that I do, and bringing it back to integrate into their lives. Because let's face it, sometimes you go to a yoga class and you're like, yeah, I'm so zenned out. Woo. And then you go outside on the street and someone like gives you the middle finger and you're like, shit, my yoga's gone. So it's like really staying with it for longer.
Yeah, I'm really glad you brought that up. I'd love to dig a little bit deeper because I've felt that very thing that you just described. And I went on my first yoga retreat in June with Stephanie to just off the coast of Portland. We referred to this as the starter retreat, the do I like this thing. And it was 3 days, but it was pretty much just contained to the 3 days, maybe a day afterwards. So when you go on a retreat, how do you, for lack of a better term, get your money's worth to make sure that it's not just contained to that experience and it's something that you can take long after you return?
Yeah, the word integration is really, really important to me because especially on my retreats, the first day is all about really like setting intentions, and then you move throughout the week and you sort of learn this toolbox to help assist you in your everyday life, to use all the tools and the practices in your everyday life. So if you are in the tech world or on your computer, how can you take a moment to pause and take 3 deep breaths before you send that email? How can you step away and have a mindful moment on your own? We're teaching you this because I think people, they don't know where to start a yoga practice or a meditation practice. So this is a retreat is really giving them the opportunity and learn how good it feels. And also, not to mention, you're immersed in nature, typically on the retreat. You are eating really healthy food. So setting you up for those practices as well. A lot of my retreats have cooking classes on them where you learn healthy cooking, where you're definitely in tune with what not only your physical body needs, but your mental wellness, your emotional body needs as well. And you take that home with you for sure.
As you, the teacher of the retreat, the architect of the whole retreat as well, what's the most fulfilling or meaningful part of it all for you?
That I am learning just as much as you are. I know nothing more than the students on the retreat, which I think is such a beautiful thing. I'm learning so much. This is how we live our lives, right? We are mirrors of one another. So I'm learning so much from each person each time I'm teaching a yoga class, from each student each time. So for me, the benefit is this beautiful honor of being able to teach people because I'm learning so much from them as I'm teaching. I always say, like, we're the same, right? Like, just because I know how to teach a yoga class, I have no pedestal that I'm on. We're on the same level here. And to meet people where they are, just because they're doing that for me as well when we're on retreat, I think that's so beautiful. The way people communicate when they're in a group setting, I studied sociology in my undergrad. So like seeing how people live and all different walks of life come together, somebody aged 19 and somebody 75 being on a retreat together that would never, maybe when they're passing on the street, have anything to talk about. But on retreat, they become best friends. It's amazing to me. And it's so fulfilling.
That was an observation of mine on my retreat. I was a bit fearful going into mine because I looked at the email list and I was like, I'm the only man here. This is one man and 19 women. Now, don't get me wrong. Many close female friends in my life. I love women. I adore them. But when they're all together all at once, it can be a lot. So I was a bit concerned about how that would go. I was also the youngest there. So I was the only man and the youngest there. So I was like, this will be interesting, but I can't wait to see how it plays out. Day one, we're all strangers. It's kind of awkward. No one really knows anyone aside from the couple friend groups that came together. And then by day 3, I'm hanging out with the 60-year-old women and like we're throwing back shots of whatever. Like, this is a great time. So I'm sure that is interesting to watch on your part.
It's very cool. And I know the dynamic is always, that's one thing that I say that I think I have. The number one question is men will ask, are there other men on this retreat? And I understand because you want to know if you're the only one. But there are many retreats that I lead that are all women. And then there are many retreats that I lead that are like half and half. It's always so fun and so different. Every retreat is so different because of the people that attend, where we are. Of course, we do the one in Mexico where it's like, I'd say the one in Mexico that I lead with Steph is like 50-50. But then like I'm doing one in Italy in October and it's all women.
What do you find that the yogis, the students, get most out of the experience? What's the feedback that you get?
Yeah, a sense of community for sure. And it's interesting because a lot of people come on the retreat solo, and I really encourage that, to have your first solo trip or any solo trip be a yoga retreat, because you're never alone, right? We are never alone, traveling or not. You are never, ever alone. And when you come into the space of a yoga retreat, you're spending, like you said, after day 3 or day 2 of your retreat, you're like, oh, this is like my family. But you walk into the space a little bit hesitant. And I think what they get out of it is like learning that they can be themselves, to love who they are. Because when you walk in and away from a yoga retreat, it's like, wow, all those people loved me for who I am. And that's a beautiful thing. It doesn't matter your yoga practice. If you can walk up 8 flights of stairs at that place we go in Mexico, it's like all uphill. Because you have somebody right there to make sure you're not falling back. For me to watch people from day 1, like you were just describing, until the end, and freedom. I had one woman, she was from New York, had never really been out of New York City, and came on the retreat in Costa Rica. And, I write up in everything, like you might see or hear monkeys. There are night sounds at night. I tell people this ahead of time because you're in the jungle. And the second day she said, I couldn't sleep because the howler monkeys. And I said, okay, maybe we can switch your room. So like by day 3, she's up in the studio, like, I love my room, because we couldn't move her room. Like the third day, she's like, I love my room. I sleep with the doors open. I can hear the birds. I can hear the monkeys. I'm like, wow, what a change, So it's also our perspective. What we think we like, what we think we need too. What we think we need, and these tiny differences of what we actually need.
Right. And also our bodies do this thing called habituation, which is a survival tactic. Something like the monkeys the first night is very jarring for you. But once you realize that this is my situation and I'm stuck with it, your body just adjusts to it. And by day 3, you forget it's even there, or you just recognize it as part of your normal experience and it's no longer weird to you anymore.
Right. Yeah, so true.
How do you choose the locations that you go to?
The Google. No. I do. I do a lot of research. I'm constantly emailing back and forth with different retreat centers. I mean, basically, if someone says, can you lead a retreat in this place? I'm like, okay. And then I research and try to find a retreat center there. And I choose somewhere warm. So I will say that people have asked me to lead a retreat in Iceland, and I'm so sorry. I haven't done that yet, but I like to be warm. But yeah, how I choose is also like selfishly, like places that I want to go and bring groups. And then I've now set it up where I basically go to like the same destinations each year or every other year. So I have built a relationship with the retreat centers. It's simple for me now because I know where we're going. The travel is a little bit easier to describe to people, and the logistics become easier if I've been there before.
What's your favorite one you've ever been on? And how many have you been on?
Wow, that's a great question. Definitely over 30. I've been doing this since 2016. So, but I would say I really loved Guatemala, and that was the 3rd retreat I think I led. It depends on the place. Like I love Bali for a place to go visit. Leading a retreat there is a lot to get people to travel there. But yeah, for leading a retreat, Costa Rica is super amazing. And I would say Guatemala.
So these retreats, they are big financial investments for the prospective yogis going there. And for a lot of people, it's probably prohibitive. A lot of people probably want to go on more of your retreats, but just can't for the financial reasons. What would be your pitch to the people who were once in your shoes when you were weighing the teacher training, who maybe don't have the money, but just feel called to, this is something I have to do? What would you say to the people who are on the fence about it, want to do it, but can't get past the financials of it?
So luckily, I offer scholarships, which is also really nice because I believe that yoga has gotten quite expensive, and it's hard to put a price tag on yoga when it's something that, I'm so honored to be able to share with people. So scholarships are offered. And then also I offer payment plans, which is really nice for people that want to come on our retreat and the price tag just seems like so not reachable at this moment. So it becomes a little bit more accessible, and also different accommodations. Like the retreat in Costa Rica has you can stay in a tent. It's like an eco-friendly tent, and that's like the least expensive price. And then you can also stay in like a ocean view suite. So I really try to pick retreat centers that have the accessibility for all levels of financial to be able to come. And the scholarship opportunity is great for people that are new yoga teachers or interested in the wellness practices. I always am open to offering that.
You hit on something, and I've always wanted to ask a yoga instructor this, and I never have. So you're the lucky victim. Have you ever been kind of at odds with yourself, or have ever felt, for lack of a better word, hypocritical because here's yoga, this ancient practice, this very sacred thing that's about connecting to your body, and here you and many other teachers are making money off of it and leading a business and having these retreats around the world and making a lot of decisions that involve like taking a lot of money from people. You get what I'm asking?
Absolutely. Yeah. And like every day I go through the battle in my mind of because again, like how do we put a price tag on something that is like part of us, if you will? It's very challenging for me. So I need to put that piece aside and remember that like I'm a leader, and like the yoga that I am teaching is to make people kinder humans. So if I can think of it like that, I'm teaching the ancient lineages of yoga. Yes. I'm teaching new lineages of yoga. Yes. I'm teaching movement in our body and things that I've learned in all my trainings over the years. But I hope that the gift that I'm giving to people is more of a full heart experience. But yes, I've had that conversation with myself and other teachers many times of like, are we allowed to do this? And calling it like a business is what has always something that I'll be honest, I struggle with, and putting a price tag on it. But I have to look at it from a different perspective as like, what service am I offering people? And I think it's to feel better about themselves, to be kind humans, to live life with an open heart. So it's not necessarily just the asana practice or the physical practice of yoga or these ancient teachings. Like I feel like I'm teaching more.
So like I said earlier, you're the Seacoast yoga retreat leader. You were really kind of one of the first to bring it to this area and to do it really well. But since then, everyone and their mother is leading a yoga retreat. The number of people who follow this podcast and it's like, I do yoga retreats. There seems to be a lot of competition here. How do you handle that? How do you deal with that?
It's not competition. It's a type of collaboration. I have a whole mentorship program for people that want to lead their own retreats, and I'm helping them to do that. So I never look at it as, my yoga class, my yoga retreat. Even if someone copied and pasted everything I said, it's going to be totally different than what I do, even if it's at the same retreat center, I believe. So I'm always excited for people that are leading retreats. I'm always happy to go on them. Like I want to attend yoga retreats, so I hope people keep doing them because I want to be a guest on them. So yeah, I say so much love for them and what they're doing. And the mentorship program as well, like I said before, is an opportunity for us to learn from each other. We're in this together. I love continuing to learn and seeing other people bloom. I mean, why wouldn't we want each other to do this? We need yoga retreats. We need this. It's a needed thing. And Lauren Lee was the person that was leading the retreats around here. She's now in Ibiza, Spain, but she was leading retreats, I think, in the Seacoast area before I was. And I went on her retreat, and it also helped me to spark this. So I should pay her some homage. I always say thank you to my teachers.
You said the yoga retreats are really needed right now. Why do you feel that way?
Because I feel there is some type of separation happening in our world for many different reasons. And I mean separation between groups of people, which is detrimental. But I also see a separation between the body and the self, like people unaware of actually sitting down and asking your body what it needs. I need water, I need food, and I need shelter. We are moving in a direction where we can't even answer these questions. So I think it's really important for us to take time to retreat and go back to what matters most and what we need most, our basic needs. And in turn, this will bring us together as a world more, I believe, to learn about the different ways people live, to learn about how to lift each other up. And it can be so simple, right? Like when these random acts of kindness, of course, but like on retreat, you are sharing a space with someone and maybe moving through a yoga practice, and you don't know if that person's moving through something a little bit deeper in their energetic body. So a retreat is a great reminder that we are not separate. And it's going to send that message, I believe, when people return from retreat to the world around them. It's like that ripple effect. So it is, I do believe it's needed.
And even when you're not on retreat, just in your daily life, how do you go about trying to do those things to make the world a better place?
I'm glad you said trying, because it's always a practice, right? Because I scream and I yell and I get upset and I'm not peaceful all the time. That's why it's a practice, right? Yoga is a practice. Mindfulness is a practice. And I think it's leading by example, right? I'm trying to practice what I'm preaching all the time. When I make a mistake, if you will, or when I trip and fall, I try again, just like with anything. Every day is a new beginning, so we're all doing our best.
You do some beautiful writing on your Instagram page. I'm a big fan of it. I'll link to it in the episode notes of this podcast. I want to call out something that you wrote. It's not word for word, but you essentially said, we're all hearing each other, but we're not listening to each other and understanding each other. What exactly do you mean by that?
I just got like a little bit of goosebumps because, yeah, this has been so much on my mind lately. Thank you for bringing that up, Troy. Hearing is something, right? When we're hearing, but are we actually listening deeply and understanding? So I think it's like, I was trying to say the example, like you can hear the ocean wave, but like, are you listening to what is in the ocean, why the wave is happening, getting to learn more about it, rather than just like setting your belief, saying you believe in this thing or setting your ways and not trying to learn or understand a little bit more about it. We're all always learning. So I think it's really important for us not just to hear each other and say, how are you today? I'm good. But to understand, why are you good today? Why are you not so good today? And to understand why. Because again, when it comes down to the bottom of it, we're all just humans that like have basic needs. We all just want to feel love and be loved. And so when we are listening and trying to understand rather than just hearing, it's going to have more depth.
I love asking this question to people, and I really want to hear your answer. Sarah, what do you want your legacy to be?
Wow. I would like to have people understand how important they are on this earth. I would like the legacy that I leave behind to be the idea that you are loved and you are whole and complete just as you are. So sending that message to the world. That's what I try to send the message to everybody that I come in contact with each day. So the legacy would be to send that message to people. You are loved and you are whole and complete as you are.
The 22-year-old girl who was in Massachusetts and was working at the restaurant and was losing her way a little bit. What would you tell that girl now? Who you are now? What would you tell that girl about how the next couple of years are going to play out?
You are loved. You are whole and complete. And yeah, right. Isn't that amazing how that transforms? So yeah, I would send her that message. Don't lose sight of your roots, of all that brought you here. This is so important that we remember all that brought us here, all the people that helped us, all of our teachers.
And lastly, Sarah, we have a closing tradition on this podcast. We ask the same final question every week to our guests, and I'll ask it to you. Sarah, what is your mission?
I believe my mission is to inspire and be inspired. So to be constantly inspired by others in the world, and to also inspire others to strive.
And that's Sarah Oleson, the Seacoast go-to gal for yoga retreats. She currently has 11 trips scheduled for the next 15 months. And if you're interested in attending one, perhaps in Italy, Spain, Peru, or even with me in Mexico, then please visit saraholsonyoga.com for more information, the link to which is in today's show notes. Now, as you've come to expect on this podcast, before Sarah left my home studio, I just had to ask her one final question. I'm a huge travel guy. It's been a big part of my life for a while. I first left the country in 2016 when I studied in Scotland and have since lived in Europe and several cool American spots. But before I started traveling, I was growing up dreaming about visiting the places I'd seen in my history books. Places like Notre Dame Cathedral in Paris, the Pantheon in Rome, or what's left of the Berlin Wall. I'm so fortunate that I've gotten to see those places, and there is still so much more to see. Funny enough, Sarah told me she also started traveling for similar reasons. And so I had to ask her what led her to want to travel in the first place. And this is what she had to say.
My mom is an artist, and we didn't have money to travel when we were little, but my mom always brought us to the Museum of Fine Arts in Boston. Like once a month we would go because we got free passes from the local library. And we were taught about different cultures through art. So I was fascinated with travel when I was young, and I would be looking at maps all the time, but I never got to travel. The first time I left the country, I don't know, I think it was Mexico for a wedding when I was 20 or something. So yeah, the idea of going to Bali was really scary. And also, I was ready. I was ready to travel because I had always wanted to.
One more time for Sarah Oleson, everybody. Earlier in the show, she also talked about Lucy's Love Bus, a cause that is very important to Sarah, who she is, and why she does what she does. To learn more about it, please visit lucyslovebus.org, the link to which I've also placed in today's show notes. Big shout out to everyone who came out to Treeline for the event last Friday. I promise I will keep you updated on future events that I'm hosting. But until then, have a great week. And if you see me around town, perhaps walking across the bridge, having my 5th coffee of the day at the Works, or having an acai bowl at the Green Room, please stop me and come say hi. I would love to hear your story. Until next week, everybody, live free or die.